Justice League Unlimited, the culmination of the entire DCAU, was absolutely perfect. And honestly, we got an extra season. As many of you may know, season 2 was supposed to be the end. The ending arc was going to be the Cadmus arc, culminating in the episode epilogue. That was going to tie everything up, tie everything together, all the way back to the events of Batman the Animated Series and Batman Beyond. However, the creators decided that they wanted to include more and bring in Darkseid, so we did get a Season 3 where we got the Legion of Doom storyline that culminated in a battle of the Legion of Doom teaming up with the Justice League to take on Darkseid. And not just any version of Darkseid, no. This was a version of Darkseid that was merged with Brainiac, the Brain Interactive construct. So, as we saw leading up to the finale of Season 2, Brainiac being merged with someone can instantly upgrade their power, as it made Lex Luthor on par with the gods. And he even said this is a godlike power. So the fact that we got Darkseid, who is already a new god, getting a power boost that would make any ordinary person god level, made him that much more of a threat. It gave us such an interesting fight in the final battle between Superman and Darkseid. You did get that iconic line that Superman feels like he lives in a world made of cardboard. That is by far one of my absolute favorite exchanges of dialogue in the entire DCAU. But that being said, what if I told you there were still more plans? What if I told you they did consider doing a Season 4. And that's why today we are talking Justice League Unlimited Season 4, What Could Have Been. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, Justice League Unlimited Season 4. Now, as I said, there was never an official Season 4 confirmed, as the network did determine that the show was just a little too expensive, especially with new shows coming out, like Ben 10 and that series, which Cartoon Network had full rights of, and they didn't have to split the profits with Warner Brothers and DC. So I do understand it. However, it is a shame to know the different storylines that they did still have planned. So I'm going to break down and get into what exactly that was. First and foremost, as we remember from the finale from Season 3, Lex Luthor and Darkseid did end up disappearing after Lex Luthor appeared and showed Darkseid the anti-life equation. And to me, this was a really, really cool ending, because it showed that although Superman does have godlike power and can go toe-to-toe with someone like Darkseid, even when he's merged with Brainiac, it was an awesome way to show that Lex Luthor is still extremely formidable. And he even has that amazing line that he took some time to go put on his power suit, which was just his business suit, which was showing us, the audience, that his true power was always his intellect, his way of outthinking every single other person, aside from Batman, because that really never worked out well for him. But that aside, it was still really, really cool. And Batman did have that amazing line of dialogue where he said he does not believe they actually died, even though they did actually see it that time. Because, as we know, we have seen it before, and then characters did return. So there were some plans for these characters to return. However, it was going to be in a much different capacity. And by that, I mean this version of the anti-life equation was not going to be used to mind control anyone or unlock the secrets of the universe. It was going to be a way to unify all life. So when Lex Luthor held out his hand with the anti-life equation and Darkseid did take his hand and they disappeared, it was going to show us them actually becoming one. They were going to essentially merge, with both of their consciousness battling and vying for control of the one true body. The one true body was going to be Darkseid's, because his was far superior to a mere mortal in Lex Luthor. However, their intellects, on the other hand, Lex Luthor was above a 12th level intellect. That's how he was able to acquire the anti-life equation. So part of the series was going to be them having this internal struggle, and then neither one of them coming out on top, and them needing to learn to coexist, similarly to how Lex Luthor had to coexist with Brainiac. However, it would be much different, because Brainiac lacked imagination, and that's what Lex Luthor brought to the table, and that's how Brainiac justified teaming up with Lex, because all he wanted was to gather all of the information and data from the universe, and then his mission would be done. Whereas Lex Luthor told him, no, once you do that, you end everything, but then you create. Then you use this ultimate knowledge, this ultimate data to create the perfect new universe. After all of these worlds that you've gathered everything about them, you can now begin anew instead of just letting everything end. So that would have been really cool to see. Obviously, these are the two biggest, in my opinion, villains for Superman, and the fact that they were going to essentially merge and then come back with a vengeance against Superman and the rest of the Justice League would have been really, really awesome to see. Obviously, I'm a huge Darkseid fan, so anytime he has any type of storyline, especially if it's as an endgame level boss, that's something I would absolutely love to see. And I wish we could have seen it. But that's not all. We weren't just going to get Lex Luthor and Darkseid merging together, learning to coexist. They actually did have several episodes planned out, one of which was going to be centered around the Green Lanterns. And not just Jon Stewart, not just Kilowog, but it was going to include other famous lanterns. Kyle Rayner is a Green Lantern that appeared in one episode of Superman the Animated Series and 2 episodes of Justice League Unlimited. However, he never had a ton of screen time outside of his appearance in Superman, which was always a big thing that fans wanted more of. Kyle Rayner is a big fan favorite, similar to Guy Gardner and Jon Stewart. So it was going to follow Jon Stewart, Kyle Rayner, and Hal Jordan. Yes, Hal Jordan, the first human Green Lantern, at least normally, unless you include Scott Allen from the Golden Age of Comics eras, or the Justice Society era, whichever you want to call it. But that being said, he is widely known as the first Green Lantern, and a lot of times the best Green Lantern, at least to a point. Jon Stewart, in some iterations, does surpass him, at least in some ways. To me, my favorite Green Lantern has always been Hal Jordan, just because I really like the aspect of everyone else in the Green Lantern Corps hating Hal Jordan simply because he's a human, simply because the humans were seen as a primitive race, and it was Hal Jordan who ended up changing their mind and making them believe in humanity, believe that humanity was not beyond saving and that they were a worthy race of people, which is a really cool storyline to go through. So the fact that they had an entire arc planned where it was going to be Hal Jordan introduced, and it was going to be a storyline in which Hal Jordan was gone for several years. That was why he wasn't in Superman, Justice League, or Justice League Unlimited, and they were going to find him, and they were going to do a storyline where it was the 3 of them teaming up to take on Sinestro, who had built the Sinestro Corps. As we know, at the end of Justice League Season 3, Sinestro was part of the Legion of Doom, who did help repel Darkseid and the forces of Apocalypse. However, the Legion of Doom did disband, and when this happened, Sinestro was going to be shown going off-world, and this was going to start him building his own Lantern Corps. And if any of you follow from the comics, he did build a Yellow Lantern Corps that did rival the Green Lantern Corps, and even in a lot of iterations destroyed a ton of the Green Lanterns. So the fact that they had any type of storyline similar to that planned out would have been absolutely amazing to see on screen. Seeing Jon Stewart, who is the Green Lantern that we came to know and love in this universe, interact with Kyle Rayner and Hal Jordan would have been absolutely amazing. There are no details as far as other lanterns that were included. To me, I feel like they could have included either Jessica Cruz, who was later introduced in the Fatal 5 movie, or they could have included Guy Gardner, who again is a fan favorite by some, but I don't know if he would have fit in this specific dynamic. However, that being said, it would have still been a really, really cool story to see unfold on screen, and we would have gotten a deeper look at why Sinestro hates the Green Lanterns. One of the few things that disappointed me about the DCAU was the lack of exploration of not just the Green Lantern Corps, but the exploration of Sinestro. He was a former Green Lantern, and as we meet him, we only know that he absolutely hates the Green Lanterns. We don't know why, we don't know his backstory, and he doesn't have any actual connection to Jon Stewart. A lot of the times in the comics and in animation, his connection is to Hal Jordan. He is a lot of times the mentor or a mentor figure for Hal Jordan before he turns evil, and he even a lot of times asks Hal Jordan to join him. So it would have been really cool to see maybe Hal Jordan had been captured that entire time by the Yellow Lantern Corps that Sinestro had been building and cultivating over the years, and this would have just been a culmination of that storyline coming to fruition. A full-on war on Oa could have been seen. It would have been absolutely amazing, and they might have even killed off either Kyle Rayner or Hal Jordan. There's no way they would have done it to John Stewart, just because since we did see certain things and certain aspects of the future, we do know John Stewart did not die until the Justice League Watchtower did blow up. So he would have been someone who would have been safe. However, everyone else that would have appeared in this arc would have been completely fair game, and that would have been absolutely amazing to see. Now, one of the other storylines that was planned, or at least some of the characters they were going to focus on, would have been Carter Hall and Shayera, Hawkman and Hawkgirl. They were going to dive deeper into the past of those characters, and also we were going to see some flashbacks of Hawkgirl when she was younger on Thanagar, and right before she did come on Earth, because as we know from the events of the original Justice League, the animated series, Hawkgirl was sent to Earth to spy on Earth, and then inevitably did lead the Thanagarians on some type of invasion, if you want to call it, against Earth. Now, she did end up changing her mind, which led to 95% of Thanagarians dying. So this arc was also going to explore that and explore her guilt for not only betraying her homeworld and betraying so many people that she did once have love and care for, but also betraying the people of Earth, the people that she had come to love, like the people in the Justice League, more specifically John Stewart. And this arc would have culminated in the relationship between John Stewart and Hawkgirl finally becoming an official thing. Because as you know, if you've seen Justice League Unlimited, the first 3 seasons, we do know John Stewart was with Vixen. However, when we saw the flash forward episodes, we do know that eventually Hawkgirl and John Stewart do get together and they have a son called Warhawk. So the fact that we could have gotten a storyline that explained not only how they got together, but how maybe the relationship between Green Lantern and Vixen did end, and then how Hawkgirl and John Stewart did come back together and rekindle their relationship, would have been really, really interesting to see unfold on screen. And seeing Hawkgirl go down this path of maybe a little bit of PTSD, maybe some depression, and just all the regrets she did have over everything that happened. And then at the end of it, coming to terms with everything and who she is, which is Hawkgirl, a hero of Earth, no longer a hero from Thanagar. That would have been so awesome. Again, those are the type of storylines that I really, really like, especially because they call back to things that happened earlier. They did also have a couple plans for Batman and the Bat Family. There was going to be a very short arc. As any of you know, if you've seen Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, the Bat Family does not appear. Technically. In one other timeline episode where they go back in time and then they go to the present where it's some alternate reality, you do see Dick Grayson, Tim Drake, and Barbara. However, they are more so freedom fighters under Batman against the regime. Again, I won't get too far into it just because of who exactly they're fighting. But that being said, that would have been really cool. Obviously, if any of you have watched any videos on this channel, you will know the Bat Family is probably my absolute favorite dynamic and my favorite group to watch in all of DC. I'm a huge Nightwing fan, my favorite superhero. So obviously, if you tell me Bat Family has some type of plans to be incorporated in what I consider the best superhero show ever, I'm going to absolutely love every second of it. Another thing that they did have plans of, but they don't have any concrete details for, was deepening the connection between Bruce Wayne and Wonder Woman, Diana of Themyscira. If any of you watched the animated series and Justice League Unlimited, you will know that the 2 characters that so many people shipped together were Wonder Woman and Batman. Now, in a lot of instances, I'm not a huge fan of this, but in this universe, it was perfect. The way they had a slow burn, the way they slowly showed their chemistry being built over time was absolutely amazing. And to see that all culminate in maybe an actual relationship that then explains why in Batman Beyond, when he's looking back at all the different women, aside from Talia, the other woman he did not have a file of was Wonder Woman. Maybe something happened. Maybe something tragic happened. Maybe they could have covered the storyline in which the Watchtower exploded, and one of the people that was on board the Watchtower was Wonder Woman. Maybe he couldn't save her, and maybe it was too difficult for him to even have pictures of her on his computer. Or maybe he had a separate file for just her individually. Again, these are all just speculatory things because there's nothing concrete. However, the fact that we were going to get some type of storyline, including these two characters and their relationship, would have been absolutely awesome to see. And there is actually one other storyline that they were potentially going to do. Now, I saved this one for last for a couple of reasons. One, because this is probably the storyline in which I wanted most, and two, there's not anything definitive about this storyline. However, it was something teased all the way back in season 2 of Justice League Unlimited. And that was going to be a story centering around the Flash and also his connection with the Speed Force. Now, as we know, the ending of season 2 of Justice League Unlimited with the Cadmus arc did culminate in Wally West's version of the Flash fully tapping into the Speed Force to take down Lex Luthor, merged with Brainiac. However, this great power did come at a price, as he did vanish into the Speed Force and did even mention that it was like something was calling to him. It was like a Speed Force. They were going to elaborate more on this and even give us a connection to a Flash in the past, and yes, I do mean Barry Allen. They were potentially going to explore the idea that Barry Allen had been trapped this entire time in the Speed Force, and Wally West, in discovering more about the Speed Force, would have brought Barry back. So we would have had two different versions of the Flash. Now again, I say this is probably the storyline I most wanted to see for a couple of reasons. Obviously, I don't fully like the idea of having Barry and Wally together, as by this point, Wally West was solidified as the Flash, so having Barry there would have felt slightly weird. But I really would have loved the idea of Wally getting to tap into that power, and they would have changed the animation around when he was running. As any of you know who watched the show, he did not produce lightning up until that point when he fought Lex. That was the only time he ever had lightning generate around him, and that's because he was using the full power of the Speed Force. So from that point on, they were going to have that lightning surrounding him every time he used his powers, which would have been really cool to see. I'm a really big fan of how that animation looked, especially with the animation style surrounding the character of the Flash and how they portrayed his abilities in this universe. I feel like going deeper into the lore of one of the most popular characters in the original 7 would have been really cool to see for a lot of fans, myself included. But that is all that we do know about the potential for a Justice League Unlimited Season 4, and this is one that I can confidently say will absolutely never happen, unfortunately, but I am grateful we did at least get to see these characters come back to the screen in Justice League versus the Fatal 5, which was a pretty enjoyable movie. But let me know what all of you think. Which of these storylines would you have enjoyed to see the most? Or are you happy that it ended with Season 3? Or would you have preferred it ended with the Cadmus arc? Let me know in the comments down below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.